Roman Abramovich, the former Chelsea owner who had to sell the club because of sanctions against Russia, actually bought another club while he owned Chelsea, and it has just now been uncovered. It involves shell companies, secret bank accounts, and yes, loans. Loans! Let them light the way. And it turned the club into a de facto Chelsea B team. It was like Red Bull, Rasenballsport Leipzig style, except nobody knew about it, and there's a lot of creepy people involved. Anyways, Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea way back in 2003. He invested over $2 billion in the club and obviously produced tremendous results. Eventually, a handful of Premier League titles, a couple of Champions League titles, and tremendous success as a club. The source of Abramovich's wealth was always subject to speculation, but not so much where his money was going inside of football itself, until now. This story was broken by The Guardian, specifically in this article, of which of course you can find in the description for your perusal, and they reviewed leaked documents that had been made available to them and were also reviewed by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. Now, these leaked documents were called the Oligarch Files, which is just awesome. That is so great. What a way to heat up the story. The Oligarch Files? Sign me up. The Oligarch Files include emails, banking records, company filings, trust documents, and compliance reports. They were obtained via a hacking group, which, according to the data, has named itself the Freaky Crew. Nice. I've never heard a name simultaneously give off "I still live in my mom's basement, but I can ruin your life with a computer." They nailed it. Now, our friendly neighborhood heroes at the Freaky Crew pulled this data that diagnoses the purchase of this mystery club from a company in Cyprus, because of course. And when I heard that, I knew I had to Google Merit Service. Now, the best way that I can describe this company in Cyprus, Merit Service, is this is where your favorite supervillain parks all of their money. Now, when you look in their services and solutions department, you see that they are a one-stop shop for holding companies. They also offer other services like yacht leasing or corporate administration to run your fake company. Look, the front page looks like a funeral home. A 45-page law about the logistics of sidewalk width is more easy to understand than most of the descriptions on its website, and it can only be translated into languages English and Russian. I didn't know that these types of companies actually existed in real life. Maybe that was naive, but this is a one-stop shop for Bond villains. Naturally, I wanted to test how stringent this company's protocols are because I can't believe that it's real. So I got their contact email, and then I created an email of my own and said, "Good morning in Cyprus. Can you help me buy a football club? I have the funds, but I am unable to use them to buy the club directly because of my status." Trying to accurately emulate Abramovich's situation in 2010. And then I said, thanks, comma, and I needed to make this believable. So I Googled a list of Russian billionaires, and I didn't want to make it too obvious, so we went to the poorest one and picked Boris Rotenberg. And we signed off with thanks, comma, Boris Rotenberg. I'll let you know what happens. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter to see if I get a response from our Bond villain factory. But I think we've officially gotten too distracted from the main point, which is that Abramovich used this company to funnel money to buy another club while he owned Chelsea, which is insane. And those leaks that were hacked take us to the Netherlands and show that it was in fact Vitesse that was essentially funded by Roman Abramovich. Now, of course, he wasn't the public face for this, so we needed a patsy, and that would be Merab Jordania, a former Georgian player who, uncited on the Wikipedia page here, was the head of the Georgian Football Federation for 7 years. He also played for a year in Iceland. He's been around. And then he appeared out of the woodwork with the funds to rescue a financially struggling club in Vitesse in 2010. This was a bolt from the heavens for Vitesse, except the fact that it wasn't actually Merab Jordania and his mysterious money doing it, because, and The Guardian does a brilliant job of tracking this with the information that was provided from the hack, $20 million was wired from Roman Abramovich indirectly to Merab Jordania at the time the purchase was completed. Look, I'm not saying that that's super obvious or anything, but the Guardian article in the description has this brilliant flowchart which tracks the flow of money through shell companies facilitated by Merit Service. See, money would be transferred from an account that Abramovich owned in the British Virgin Islands, and then it would land at a company in Liechtenstein named Trigonia Anstalt, or a company in Belize named Limburg Holdings. They would transfer the money to Marindale Trading, which would then transfer the money to the Vitesse holding company, which Jordania owned. This happened basically at the same time that the club was being purchased, and it was 20 million euros, even though the club was only purchased for 8 million euros. Except looking at this flowchart, you're probably wondering who owns the stuff in red. That's where we meet our third friend, Alexander Chigrinsky, the business partner of Roman Abramovich, according to Alexander Chigrinsky's brother's Wikipedia. He's not cool enough to have his own, apparently. And then it was his job to transfer the money through more opaque offshore accounts to Jordania, so it was just very hard to track in the first place. Which that in itself is very clear. The Dutch authorities conducted not one, but 2 investigations of Vitesse, and both came up empty. But they were working with public documents and whatever Vitesse provided, so they were working at a distinct disadvantage. Because they weren't working with the freaky crew, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Let's go freaky crew. Jordania eventually left the club in 2013, and this guy, Alexander Chigrinsky, who we'd only find one picture of him from Football Manager 20. This is not an easy guy to Google here. He took over the club and then owned it for 5 years. When Jordania stepped down, it was revealed that Alexander Chigrinsky was a big part of the funding to buy the club in the first place. He was like a dark partner for 3 years. But even after he took over the club through the end of 2015, the loans from Abramovich kept coming, and they were monstrous. By the time 2015 was over, 166 million had made its way to Marindale Trading in the British Virgin Islands, with 117 million of that being drawn on by the club. Chigrinsky would own the club until 2018, and over this period, while all this money was being transferred, it wasn't just this financial side project for Abramovich. He was using this and abusing this connection. World Soccer Talk's Chris Moore did some number crunching, and 29 players from Chelsea went on loan to Vitesse over the 8-year period that Abramovich had massive financial involvement. 29! This includes Mason Mount in 2017-2018. Vitesse also enjoyed significant success, so it wasn't really a bad thing, unless you ask Merab Jordania. See, Vitesse started to compete around the top of the table, and Jordania was upset that he wasn't getting more money from his friend Abramovich, and he accidentally let something very telling slip. This is what prompted the second Dutch investigation. While he was so upset about the funding he couldn't acquire, he said it was because London didn't want that. Who's in London? Oh, they're in London. Wow, what a coincidence. What was that? I spent too much time on the internet. He later vehemently recanted this statement, but to be honest, there's no good way to interpret the fact that he said it at all. At the very, very least, even if Abramovich isn't exercising direct control, which this makes it sound like he is, then the loans that Chelsea's providing Vitesse in bulk are controlling club policy to a really unhealthy extent. That's the very least. Ignoring the $166 million, which honestly I feel like Russian oligarchs do all the time. Now, The Guardian actually managed to get a hold of Merab Jordania, which is amazing because they couldn't get a hold of anybody else behind an army of lawyers who all no-commented or boilerplate commented their way out of this whole situation. And Jordania did acknowledge that that money was sent from Abramovich, which feels like an oopsie. He said, "When I started the project, sometimes money wasn't enough, and I was using also money of my friends, and first of all, Roman Abramovich and Chigrinsky." What's 166 million euros between friends? It was, let's say, personal debt. My personal debt to Abramovich and Chigrinsky. Now putting aside the real life risk that you take on when you take 100 million euros in loans from Russian oligarchs, how can you play that off as a personal loan? It's impossible. The turnover of Vitesse, The Guardian reports, is 12 to 14 million euros a year. You're getting much more than that to run the club. What of your own money are you using to run the club at all? All of this while you're taking 29 Chelsea players on loan. Look, I know Chelsea used to loan a lot of players. I love loans. Still, that is a lot of loans. There's simply no way you can put all these pieces together and not understand that Roman Abramovich was calling the shots for Vitesse over this 8-year period, unless they can provide any extra information, which, given all of the no comments in this story, they do not seem particularly keen to provide. And if it's a loan with no strings attached, why are you saying you can't push for an Eredivisie title because London doesn't want that? It doesn't make any sense. Now, of course, everybody else denied knowledge from London to Amsterdam, from Chelsea to Vitesse. Nobody had any idea where hundreds of millions of euros were coming from. Sorry, 100 million plus euros were coming from to fund the struggling club. So here we are. Roman Abramovich, one of the most controversial owners in the history of the Premier League, who owned the club for nearly 20 years, also owned the club in the Eredivisie. He was the sole financial provider of it, and that just has to be the definition that you use for owner. And he used it as a Chelsea farm team, but now Shigorinsky sold the club in 2018 to another Russian businessman who was looking to sell the club last year. I don't think there's really anything else you can do other than acknowledge the fact that if you ever want to start a Bond villain company, Merit Service is for you. Now, while I wouldn't necessarily recommend using Merit services, you did use this channel for enjoyment, and if you did actually enjoy the video, please do hit the subscribe button. Also, if you want to read more about this story, every one of the sources used for it are in the description. The Guardian article is freaking awesome, but those are gonna stay there, and you're on a binge right now, so if you want to keep watching videos and come back to the Guardian article later, I already pointed up here. What video is up here? Let's see. A Wonder Kid that disappeared. That's the video I put up there. So enjoy that one next. He really did actually disappear. But why? Ooh.